What is going on? Eric Henry, Texas 247 beat writer, Horns247, pinch hitting for Chip Brown, who had to take care of a quick emergency. He's all good. He'll be back next week. But in the interim, we've got managing editor, Horns247, Hank South. And we are here live from Darrell K, Texas Memorial Stadium in the immediate aftermath of Steve Sarkisian and players' post-game press conference following the team's 27-10 win, which, as Steve Sarkisian emphasized in the postgame, is the most important thing to come out of this is the win, because we will get to all of the bad, because trust me, there was plenty of bad and ugly. The good, Texas's defense; bad, seemingly everything else. The team's 27-10 win over UTEP, a game that I will remind fans who probably don't need much of a reminder. Texas entered this game as 41.5-point favorites. That was not the case here this afternoon. Hank, I'll go to you. What was your biggest takeaway from today's game?
Yeah, I think it's everyone's biggest takeaway is just a sluggish offense. It just didn't ever really click. There were times when they got things going, and really it was right out of the gate. First play of the game, CJ Baxter has a 4 or 5 yard carry. He comes limping off the field. You lose your starting running back, and you kind of have to thrust in your reserve guys right away. But that wasn't even the storyline. That I thought the running backs played great in replacing CJ Baxter. The storyline's Arch Manning. They just couldn't get it going offensively. We saw off-target passes again. He threw the pick across the field in the first half or whatever that was, and just never could really get rhythm. Eventually started using his legs a little bit more. Steve Sarkisian talked about that in the post game, but still. 27 points against a team you probably should have gotten to the 40s or 50s at least. Just didn't cut it fully today, and Arch kind of put that on his shoulders after the game. But for me, offensive performance was too sluggish.
Yeah, you take a look at the final numbers here. Texas ran 81 plays. Hank almost said Chip. It's second nature to say Chip here in this. 81 plays. Hank only got 340 yards. I say only because if you run 81 plays, you're hoping to have much more of an offensive production than that. To your point about the running back, super quick before we get to my overarching takeaway. Yeah, CJ Baxter went down on the first play. The injury update we got from Steve Sarkisian in the postgame is that it was a hamstring injury. No further update there. That will come in the days to come, more than likely on Monday when we speak with Sark and players for the Monday availability. But in the interim, it was James Simon and Jarrett Gibson. They combined for 35 carries. I'll get to Christian Clark in a second. The two lead backs for James Simon and Jarrett Gibson combined for 35 carries, net of 131 yards combined between the two backs. James Simon, 17 carries, 67 yards, no scores. Jarrett Gibson, 18 carries for 64 yards, no scores. Christian Clark, who was someone I thought who, again, his numbers here are 7 carries for 32 yards. But in the early going, Hank, and he did actually finish the game as Texas's leading receiver, 2 receptions for 32 yards. Ryan Wingo had 3 receptions for 32 yards on 7 targets and a touchdown. So I thought his impact was felt because, quite frankly, it carried the majority of the offensive load. Yeah, we talk about my biggest takeaway. We can do this in terms of Texas's defense, right? It is legit, and they were not set up for success in a myriad of ways because they were out there on the field for 59 plays. But again, the Texas offense didn't really give them much to work with. They forced how many turnovers here? It looks like they forced 2 turnovers. The 2 Malachi Nelson interceptions. I believe one was from Jelani McDonald. Also Grayson Littleton getting his first career interception. So the defense is what it is, but you can't avoid the fact that the offense, Arch Manning and company, just looked out of sync. The thing that stood out to me from Steve Sarkisian's postgame, I asked him, he talked about guys pressing, right? Saying that, hey, and I talked about on Monday, saying some guys are pressing, not playing within the scheme, not playing within themselves. Hank, he reiterated that, talking about guys pressing, but I also asked him, how much of this is on you? What do you feel like you could have done better in terms of the game plan and the game prep? And he did say that he didn't feel that it was as much scheme, but what the players are being asked to do, they clearly are not doing it in a manner that's acceptable for any Steve Sarkisian offense or any offense that's going to go play in the SEC. And that, he did say, is, hey, that's why they call me coach. So I will use that to lead into my big takeaway. I think this coaching staff, right? I'm not putting it on coaches. It's clear players have to go out and execute, but this coaching staff, Steve Sarkisian, $10 million salary. These are $10 million problems, right? You have to get that fixed. And Hank, do it with a sense of urgency because you got Sam Houston coming to town next week. And then after that, it's SEC play. The type of play that we saw here tonight will not get it done in SEC play. So Hank, I'll pass you this. We'll do 3 quick takeaways: offense, defense, special teams, and then spin it forward to Sam Houston and, of course, Southeastern Conference play. Hank, we've covered Arch Manning, right? And if you want to go that direction again, Steve Sarkisian talked about Arch's delivery, saying that he felt he was speeding it up and then slowing it down, and maybe that was playing a factor. So I won't speak for you. If you have something else outside of Arch Manning you want to touch on offensively, go for it. If not, if you want to go back to Arch, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I would talk about these young running backs. I thought we saw what we heard about Christian Clark in camp and coming back from his injury, which obviously was a very significant injury to come back to, and just how he was still explosive. He still had that bounce. He's a threat out of the backfield. We kind of saw all that today from Christian Clark. I even on one end around, he was out as the lead blocker and held up a guy. I think Ryan Niblett took it around. But saw a really good block from Christian Clark as well. So he was kind of all over the place, with, performing at a high level of what he needed to do. We saw most of James Simon in the second half. Sark mentioned him earlier in the week as a guy that was going to get some run, and we saw a lot of James Simon. And I think he flashed for a true freshman. A lot of people didn't even know who he was coming into the game, and I thought he held his own, and we saw some good things. I think the biggest takeaway: the running backs didn't put the ball on the ground. You put 3 relatively young, obviously Jared Gibson has experience last year, but he was the culprit last week in the lone fumble. They held onto the ball this week. They didn't turn it over outside of Arch's 1 interception, which I'm sure he would want back. He was even talking about how he thought he could really fit it into Parker there, throwing it back across the field. That didn't work. But, I thought the running backs were the one positive you could look at this offense. And then back to Arch, a little bit towards the end, he got that touchdown pass to Wingo. So, is that going to be the slump buster? I don't know. It wasn't some insane play. I think it was a 4-yard touchdown pass, little out route. But maybe that's what they need. And Arch talked about that, how he went to Wingo right after that play and said, okay, let's get this thing going. So, I don't think anyone's harder on themselves than them right now. And, I sensed that speaking to Arch after the game. He was like, man, I know I'm better than this. And so I'll be curious to see how they come back out against Sam Houston next week to see, we wanted to see, consistent performance. I think we saw less consistency than we did against San Jose State. So, that's their last tune-up before, you hit the road and go to Gainesville, and you just can't afford these kind of mistakes in SEC play, especially in a place like the Swamp.
Yeah, I'll quickly go to a couple of comments here before I give my offensive, and I'll combine offensive and defensive takeaway here. Stan's dad, appreciate you watching. You say Chip always says a sign of a good team's week-to-week improvement is a sign of a bad team getting worse from week to week. It's a fair question, Stan's dad. There's nothing we can do to try and defend what you saw. Again, it's not a bad team, but the offense is regressing, no doubt about that. CB, Chris Bennett, appreciate you watching. You said the sidearm was back. No doubt about that. I'm going to go offense and defense here, and then I'll pass it back to Hank for defense and special teams. I'm going to go with the receivers, Hank. I don't know how you felt about it, and this is one of those things when you're watching the game live and you're trying to do so many things. I'm not down on the receivers per se because obviously Arch Manning's passes were inaccurate. There's no doubt about that, right? But you would expect a Ryan Wingo, a Parker Livingstone, a Ryan Niblett. We've heard so much about the speed of Texas's receivers to just be able to go beat a guy, right? And again, I haven't had a chance to look at all 22, look at the game replay to see where Scotty Walden and defensive corner Bobby Daly, where their secondary was lining up. Maybe they were taking away some of those things, right? But you just kind of, if you feel like you're a Texas fan, you're just waiting for one of these playmakers at receivers, just go beat someone, just go make a play, right? That is something that I'm interested to go back and watch in addition to the obvious, which is Arch Manning, as you said. 11 of 25, that's unacceptable. I mean, that's unacceptable at the group of 5 level, at the FCS level. It doesn't matter who you are. Defensively, I'm going to go with Jelani McDonald. He just is a guy who always finds himself around the football, always making plays. I wrote about it in my instant reaction. I felt he made a couple of open field tackles early on in the first quarter. These are games, I know I've said it to you, we sit next to each other for the audience, 247 crew, we all sit in the same area in the press box. And I said to you a couple times, like, hey, these are plays that are really preventing UTEP from getting momentum. And quite frankly, if this were in Arkansas, a Texas A&M, for example, even a Vanderbilt, Hank, and they came in and Texas's offense was sluggish the way it did, the way it was, or abysmal, some would say, maybe, Texas is down 10-0, 14-0 before they find their first score, right? So those type of plays from Jelani McDonald and the rest of the defense to buy time for the offense, for me, are huge. Hank, I'll pass it back to you. Defense and special teams, takeaways.
Yeah, I'm torn on defense. I love the pick of Jelani. Grayson Littleton, obviously getting his first interception as a Texas Longhorn true freshman. I felt that, last week we saw San Jose State kind of pick on him a little bit, target him, obviously, the younger guy, that makes sense. That he was going to go after Ohio State, tried it too, didn't work as well for Ohio State. San Jose State had some sort of magic formula to make him play a little bit more true freshman-like. I thought he came out and played really well today. Obviously got the interception. They got the I don't know if it was Jelani's interception or I think it was Littleton's interception. The whole team runs over to Bevo.
Yeah,
they got the team penalty flag. So I don't know if that's a thing they do when first time interception or what. But second week in a row they've done that now after Jalen Gilbo last week in his pick. But beyond Grayson Littleton, thought he played well. Hero Canoe, I think he is a star in the making on this Texas defense. And I talked to him after the game, and this interior defensive line can kind of just come at teams in waves and really just make things difficult for opposing offenses with just the different, the guys they can bring out. By the fourth quarter, you're just wearing down an offensive line because you have relatively fresh guys. I don't have the exact snap counts right in front of me, but Hero Canoe was a difference maker in the middle. I thought every time they were getting pressure up the middle, he was one of the guys involved. Either Hero Canoe, Travis Shaw, two transfers they bring in the offseason. But I think his final stat line was 3 tackles, 2 tackles for a loss, a couple of hurries, and a sack. So, I thought Hero Canoe really made his presence felt today, especially, he's getting an opportunity. They don't have Alex January this week. He's, from what we're hearing, he's probably coming back next week. But Hero Canoe's in the starting lineup. He's taking advantage of that opportunity, and I thought he really had a good showing today.
Yeah, no. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say special teams. I thought overall, I thought special teams was great. The Warren Roberson penalties. But I thought Niblett. He's kind of answered the call in terms of everyone in the first couple games, or Ohio State especially, is like he's letting the ball bounce. He needs to return these kicks. I thought he was very aggressive with his returns. He had at least 2 really nice returns that were set up. Obviously, Mason Shipley, he's doing what he needs to do from short yardage field goals, but he's still hitting them. I know Texas fans can appreciate that. But, yeah, I think Niblett really kind of coming into his own on the kick return or on the punt return and kick return. He had a nice return to start the game, or one of the storylines of the special teams.
Yeah, no, Hank, I'll pick up where you left off there, right? When I did my 5 pressing questions entering this game on Friday, I had number 4 at Mason Shipley. Some fans thought I was being a little hard on Mason, but my point was, what got Bert Auburn run out of town wasn't making a kick against San Jose State, right? It was missing kicks in the biggest moments. But I will say this. Mason Shipley's done what has been asked of him, and he's done it really well. So want to shout him out there. Jack Bomeister, again, averaging 47.8 yards per punt today, along at 58, 1 inside the 20. Did a great job of flipping the field when Texas's offense put him in bad position, quite frankly, or would have put the defense in poor field position. And I think you hit on something with Ryan Niblett, right? We're kind of questioning who's going to be that guy who can break things open. While Texas's offense is trying to find themselves, every little yard count. Ryan Niblett in the return game certainly made a name for himself today. So with that, we will wrap things up. Chip Brown will be back. We will tape the flagship podcast on Wednesday. Keep an eye out for Hank South, because the State of Recruiting podcast will also be coming back in the near future. But for Hank South, managing editor of Horns247, I am Eric Henry, Texas beat writer. Chip Brown, again, he'll be back next week. Good night from DKR Texas Memorial Stadium. Longhorns win 27-10. All of the focus turns to Sam Houston State next week, 7 p.m. kickoff here, ESPN Plus, SEC Network Plus, and then SEC play awaits the Longhorns.